Welcome back to another episode of Season 5 of the RAG podcast. As you guys know by now, this is the number one podcast across the recruitment sector globally. And we've always been on a mission to help recruitment agencies grow by interviewing founders and telling their stories of success from startup all the way to scale up and exit. Well, this season we're a little bit different. How do you, as a recruitment leader and founder, maintain your family and friendships whilst being the best person at work? How do you stay physically fit mentally and emotionally? And how do you find time for yourself in the madness? How do you find time for self-interest, for hobbies, and self-improvement? Well, to help you with this, I'm going to be interviewing someone every single week that can demonstrate experience in one or more of these areas. So I'm going to talk to recruitment founders and also some experts from outside the industry who can deep dive into things like relationships and health and well-being. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast. Today I am joined by Matthew Eames. Matthew is the founder of Eames Consulting, Eames Group, now as it's known, with a number of entities. Another guest that I'm bringing back on for the second time, Matthew came into my first office studio in February 2019. Very, very ropey office that was in its entirety. And we had a really good chat. I listened back to this episode recently, and it's quite interesting, actually, how different the world was back then. At the time, Eames were about 140 staff across multiple global locations, very much office-based, insurance, financial services. And Matthew had effectively stepped away from the CEO role. He brought a CEO in who was running the ship, and he was doing more business development and new projects. And he was very open about the fact that this was a direction that he wanted to go down and he was enjoying. However, I know the CEO that he had is no longer with them, and obviously, since then, we've had a global pandemic and everything's changed. So in today's episode, we talk about the changes both from the business and also Matt's personal life, and how the business is still 140-ish people. They're just about to launch in the USA, which is amazing. But the business is 20 years old, and I still don't know if I've met a founder with more energy than Matthew Eames. If you're ever thinking, 10 years in, you want to sell and swim off into the sunset, then Matt's going to prove that, you can still love it just as much on year 20 as you do in year 1. Right. Let's get into today's episode. Without further ado, Matt, welcome back to the RAG podcast.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know. Well, be here is not the right phrase anymore, is it?
Okay, on this.
On here. We had a bit of fun before the show, just talking about the reality of our different. So you came in February 2019.
Yeah.
It's funny because I had Josh Rayner on the show, who I also interviewed in February 19. He was on last week.
I saw that.
And yeah, it was a bit. I've not made. I'm not purposely going out trying to find old guests, but it is lovely to have people back on and see what's gone on. And so February 19, I've listened back, and you were like a 140-man business. You were London predominantly based with multiple offices around the world. Just give us the overview of Eames today. So what's the business look like today and as a company right now?
So it's pretty similar. I mean, COVID's obviously happened in between. So we've, like a lot of firms, I think we've probably right-sized a little bit through that, and then we've grown again. So, today the business is in great shape. We are hiring, obviously, across all our offices. So if anyone's interested, do get in touch. We're in good shape. The business is performing incredibly well. Attrition is at its lowest. Productivity is at its highest. We've just had a 3-star accreditation, so a world-class, outstanding business to work for in terms of employee engagement. So I'm delighted. I'm absolutely thrilled with where we are right now. But that's only come really because of the work that we've done previously over the last couple of years, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But in terms of headcount, we're pretty close to that number actually across the offices.
And have you got the same physical offices as you had back then?
We have, yeah. Although I'm delighted to be able to announce that we launched, and you probably saw it. We launched in New York on last Monday, so a week ago. And that was something that we'd been looking at for some time. Yeah, I'm really thrilled about that. Actually, as you know, it's a very exciting market. It's big.
It's amazing.
But we've taken our time to go into that US market. You know, lots of kind of research, talking to lots of people in different states across the US, just to make sure that we go in eyes wide open. So yeah, we launched last Monday. We have got plans to grow that business and others across the US at some point in the future. So yeah, very excited.
Why did you choose New York as the first stop?
It was purely around the individual, actually. I mean, you know, I think pre-pandemic, you probably looked at the US and went, you know, where do we want to be? Because, you know, which jurisdiction do we want to serve? But the pandemic's just blown all that apart. You know, you speak to people and they're now working across the US entirely from one state, or the talent's moved as well. So those people that were living in the US, in New York, for example, have moved to Miami because they've taken, like people in the UK and other countries, they've taken life-changing decisions to move. So it's made it much more difficult to find the talent. You can't really zone in on New York anymore because that talent probably is in Miami now.
I'm just thinking like me. This is like me. I was in London when we last recorded. Now I live in Sheffield, and they do say that Sheffield is the Miami of the UK, right? So I'm looking out. Honestly, I'm looking out the window.
The sun's out today.
It is. It's incredible. Similarity to the guys over there. But the weather is actually beautiful right now, and I'm off to Key West in 2 weeks' time near Miami. I'm excited.
Very nice. I know it. Actually, my brother lives in Florida, so he lives in a place called Wellington, just about half an hour away from Palm Beach. So the Keys are
amazing.
South from there. It's a bit of a drive, but it's lovely.
I'm flying into Key West, so I'm flying from Manchester to Atlanta, Atlanta to Key West. One of my best mates from university, a Londoner, he moved out there 12 years ago to play football, and then he had a baby, and he's a fireman in Key West. So I've said for 12 years.
I can think of worse places to be a fireman.
Yeah, he used to be a jet ski instructor. Now he's a fireman. And
I was going to say, I don't know how many fires there are in Key West and how much work actually gets done. But
I think it's more. They do have floods and things, don't they? They had some serious hurricanes.
It's quite low level. It's quite low.
He gets involved. He seems to be. I mean, I think he's either really busy or not at all. But 12 years, I've said I'll meet him, so I'm excited to go and see him. Take the family, and that's going to be wicked. But no, I'm excited for your US journey. Tell us, for anyone who doesn't remember the last episode, hasn't listened, where are your other locations around the world?
So the locations we're headquartered in London. So the business started in September 2002, actually. So we're coming up to be 20 years old as our kind of the Eames consulting business, which is our contingent business and the biggest part of the group. And then they've got other offices in Asia. So we set that up in April 2010 in Singapore. We chose Singapore over Hong Kong. So April 2010, we established there, and then we went to Hong Kong following that, probably about 5 years ago. We've got a SECO license in Zurich, so we can trade in Zurich, but it's unmanned, but we can use that to trade in the Swiss markets, and then obviously New York as well now. So, but that's the contingent business, and then we've got a couple of other businesses that sit within the Eames Group as well. So one is a search business based in the UK, and that tends to operate internationally. So the team's located in predominantly London, essentially, but they transact in the US, actually across EMEA, and they have done in the US, in Asia. And then we've got a solutions business as well. So that's kind of project delivery, augmentation type work.
Because that was when we spoke. I remember we
would have been just starting that. I would have thought.
You were like literally you just got the consulting business off the ground, so you were winning your first few projects. You were excited about it. You talked about you had a strong, obviously, associate network that you could bring.
That's
right. So where is that? What's that business look like today?
So that business has matured, I suppose. Because I think a lot of people went into that space as a reaction to kind of IR35. I think a lot of people went into that and thought about it being quite a useful swerve around that, and the augmentation model took precedent. But we've gone in trying to build and focused on building a consulting business. So taking projects and running them with where we can permanent employees. So that business has gone through, I suppose, a maturing curve over the last 3 years. So I mean, effectively, we've proven the model. It's worked. We've leveraged our network, but we are focused now on hiring permanent folk into that business. But it's in good shape. It's got a huge opportunity. We focused it on the insurance markets because that's where our heritage is from.
And is it change into insurance?
Yeah, it's focused on the IT and business transformation market, essentially.
My old world.
My old world as well.
It's a great market. There used to be.
Yeah, it is.
There's a couple of players in that space, wasn't there? Like there was what were they called now?
It was just you and me, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it would have been. But in the solutions though, there was obviously you had your big cap Geminis and your EYs, but then there was a few insurance bespoke like boutiques, the Oxbow partners. You know those guys?
Oxbow, Baringa probably played in that space a little bit, and probably well they still do. Yeah, some of them.
There was a software product like a broking system, and they had a consultancy off the back of it. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. And they still do operate in that space. I know exactly the one you mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But there's a real opportunity there, though, isn't it? Because obviously, some of the really big projects will go to the big four, but then there's a big gap within that syndicate community.
There is, and that's exactly the market that we're targeting. You're absolutely right. So you get a small syndicate, or you get a medium-sized MGA or broking business. They don't want to use the big firms, and it's a little bit like the recruitment market. The feedback that you get from clients on using global institutions to do their recruitment is always the same. It takes a long time. They charge a lot of money. We don't feel as though the process is being done with us. It's not particularly consultative, etc. And that's the same sort of feedback that you get in the consulting space, where they're sort of unwieldy, and the classic of, the 18 turn up, win the pitch, obviously, and then they tend to populate the project with junior folk, right, and charge extraordinary amounts of money for those individuals, and you don't get the SME knowledge and experience that you're really looking for. And I think that's the market, and that's the offset for us, is that we've got access to, having spent 20 years in that IT business transformation space in the insurance markets, we've got access to SMEs that have been doing this day in, day out. And we know who the good people are. We've often deployed them into client projects, so they can be referenced. And so for us, that's exciting. We don't want to be pitching against the big four necessarily. We want to be taking discrete projects where the client says we don't want to use one of the big four, but we want to use a partner that we can work with and trust to deliver this project. So we've done all manner of different projects, which has been it is, and we're kind of getting that right. It's done well, and it's profitable, and it's in good shape, but we're really doing quite a lot of work now around what do we want to be, what's the EVP, why would people come want to come and join that business, which is not a recruitment business. It's a solutions kind of management consulting, if you like, business. But we've got work to do, but there's a huge opportunity, and it's in that part of the market that you've just talked about.
Love it. So let's go back to 2019.
Yeah,
different world, a completely different world. We're only talking 3 years, but by God, the world's changed, right? And at the time, you had a CEO guy who I'd met and we'd done some work with. A great guy. I remember working with him closely. And I think what was interesting about the show was that you'd spent 17 years running the show, but over the last 3 years, you'd stepped away from that CEO role.
Yeah,
you picked a guy out from Asia. He'd done some work for you in Hong Kong and built an office or so.
That's right. Yeah,
and then he'd landed in the UK, and he was the people. He was steering the ship while you were doing business development, consulting, exec search stuff. You were more market facing, and I think what I really liked about the episode was that you were really honest that actually where your skills lied at the time, you felt were more on the front facing side. And it was nice to have someone overseeing the kind of the corporate message, the bigger play projects, and the people agenda. So I know Guy's no longer with you, right? He went off in the pandemic, I believe, and set up his own.
It was early 20, actually, February 20.
Yeah, just before the pandemic. Just around the time. Yeah. So what happened in 2019 with that? Because it did seem like you had it all set. It was in a really good place.
Yeah. So Guy joined. Yeah, you're right, from Asia. He set up our Hong Kong office, which was great, because it's quite difficult finding talent in Hong Kong, and certainly being that remote, but we needed a trusted individual to sort of stand it up. But I think it wasn't, when Guy came back to the UK, it wasn't an easy few years. I mean, that was back in 2016. We just on the back of 2015, which was our best ever year in terms of business performance. 2016 was the year that the Guy landed back in the UK. We had a referendum as well, which didn't necessarily help, right? So the following years were tough, and I think broadly it's fair to say that the business didn't perform where we expected it to, and I think that just came to a head for Guy, really. That he's actually gone and set up his own business, which is
Exec
a
search,
complete change. Yeah, a complete change in the digital space, complete change to running, what was a large business with multiple offices overseas. And that's a lifestyle change because you're not managing that many people and you're working from home on your own business. So I think for him, he obviously decided that that's what he wanted to do. He'd been in the industry, he'd worked in two fairly big businesses. Prior to us, it was Ambition, which was a bigger business than us, actually. And then came and joined me in the UK, initially working out of Asia. But for him, obviously, I think it was a choice that he wanted to make to have his own thing. And he had a young daughter, still does obviously have a young daughter with his wife, Kate. And
timing-wise, I remember when he set up, he reached out, we had a quick chat. Timing-wise, I think at the minute when he said he was doing it, I was like, "You're bonkers, right? You're leaving a stable role or whatever. You're a CEO of a big company. We're going through the biggest, we don't know what to expect. The pandemic is completely.
Market was good in 19 though, wasn't it?
Well,
and even up to February 20.
But February 20, when he was going, I think it was like right, and then within a month it all changed, right? So
yeah, completely.
But actually, people that set up that year, the ones that I've known, they've done well because it leveled the playing field. Everyone went remote. Everyone, furlough was used.
It did.
Big companies.
It did.
We'll talk about how you dealt with that. But I noticed that the playing field was leveled for a bit, and I know it's come back very strongly. But people that started in that time, I think they probably, it wasn't like they were on their own in their underpants at home while everyone else was working. Yeah, but everyone was.
Yeah.
So that thing of starting in your back bedroom everyone was working that way. So I think it was an interesting time to do it. I don't, obviously I don't think you could have planned
it was good. It was good for the business because it gave me an opportunity to get closer to the business. So my role previously, you're right, in some respects was externally facing. I was out in the market in front of clients, but I was also responsible for our executive search practice and setting up and establishing the solutions business. So I had two businesses to kind of stand up and kind of oversee, if you like. So it wasn't just exclusively, client facing. But timing wise, actually it worked pretty well because ultimately it gave me an opportunity to get very close to the business again, which I did.
So how did the business react to the pandemic? So can you take us back to that?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the world did change, didn't it? And nobody, in some ways, and I deliberated saying this or not, but I quite enjoyed that year. It sounds a bit strange, but
I think if we take away the fact, just so I don't want anyone listening and going, what? So let's take away the fact we're very aware of how bad that year was for people from a health
absolutely. On a personal level.
Yeah, put that to one side.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. What I meant was I enjoyed the challenge of running the business.
And I think I'd agree with you.
In circumstances that nobody knew how to deal with and we'd never seen before. That's the bit that I enjoyed.
No, and I think
kind of being up against it and that kind of camaraderie from the business.
What was it like? Did you closed the... Did you have the Farringdon office at that point?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, we only recently moved. So at the back end of last year, we moved into 12 Moorgate now. But I suppose your question was how we dealt with the pandemic, and I think we took action pretty quickly. So in March, just before the furlough scheme was announced, actually, we had a board meeting and we looked across the business at people had just joined that were unproven. Or perennial underperformers, and did what any other firm would do, which is trim some cost and get some people out of the business that we couldn't see functioning or performing in what was happening very quickly and evolving around us. So it wasn't a huge amount. It was less than 10% across the group, but we did act quickly to remove those individuals from the business.
Did they then come back and ask to be furloughed once that scheme was announced?
Some of them did, yes, but the answer was negative. Unfortunately, because for those that have been underperforming, as you know, the kind of rules around 2 years of service, and it brings them back in scope, doesn't it? So it makes that just that decision much more difficult. So it just prolongs that decision. So yes, unfortunately, and a tough decision that I had to make.
And we did the same thing. There's only a couple of people, really small, but they instantly came back and said, "Look, can you furlough us?"
And naturally.
I said, "Well, looking back, maybe I made the wrong call, but my decision was, it was called the job retention scheme, and you didn't have a job at the end. Like, I was like, literally, there is no job for you at the end of this, so it would be unfair to. It's going against what the scheme's designed for. If I genuinely was like, I just want to park some cost for 6 months or whatever, I would have used it. Again, looking back, probably for the small amount of people we dealt with, we probably would have been a nicer thing maybe to make that. But I'm comfortable with the decision I made at the time with the information I had.
Yeah, me too. And you have to be, don't you? I think if you look back over any sort of, tough time in your life and business or whatever, as long as you can look back and you can kind of feel at peace with yourself about those decisions and feel as though they were the right ones, then you did the right thing. And I do too. So, so we did use the furlough scheme, but essentially, I think the beauty of a recruitment business is you've got a CRM. And you can see exactly what people are doing, versus other industries. And you can see those people that are struggling, and you can see those markets that are doing okay and people actually performing quite well. And so, we looked at the data and we just made data-led decisions all the time. We moved our board meetings from monthly to weekly. And we moved our director catch-ups, leadership team catch-ups to weekly. And then we had, every couple of weeks, we had the board met with the kind of corporate services functions so that we could make sure that we were across the business. Lots of comms, 3 times a week. I was communicating with the business globally on business performance and what we're doing and starting some initiatives. So I think for us, whilst we furloughed the business performed well. Productivity of those individuals that weren't furloughed went through the roof. I mean, it doubled, right? So, and that's really what kept the business on track. It was a profitable year for us, I'm pleased to report. And I think for those people that we furloughed, we spoke to them often. We communicated with them often. We started loads of initiatives. The focus switched very quickly to, firstly, tech enablement. Can people work from home? What do they need? So loads of laptops were ordered, sort of laptop stands, monitors, all that kind of stuff, checking in and making sure that tech was working and people could actually operate. But then very quickly after that, it was on to wellness and well-being.
Let's just touch on the work bit, though, before we move into well-being, because I'm interested. You strike me as someone who probably trained in the world that was very office-based. Like, I don't see you as being particularly open to the whole working from home stuff before the pandemic. I can't imagine that was big on your agenda. The fact that you have to buy laptops and things, it shows the business was heavily leveraged in the office. How did you personally deal with that transition of trust when it comes to saying, well, fuck, we're not going to, obviously the CRM tells us what people are doing. I get that, but still, it is still a complete redirection of what you've ever known at that point.
How do you deal with this? So the question is how you deal with the trust thing. You just have to, right? And I think you assuming you've got some there before, right? And I wasn't. There was no reason for me not to trust anyone previously. So it wasn't like I was coming from a place where I didn't trust the business to having to trust the business. I think ultimately you just have to, right? So when you've got any inkling of doubt,
did you learn a lot about yourself? Did you learn a lot about yourself? Did you learn a lot about yourself in that period?
Did I learn a lot about myself? That's a good question. Probably. I mean, I worked pretty efficiently from home is the answer. Whereas before I never had. I was in the office 5 days a week and I had a 3-hour commute every day. So I say 15 hours a week. I got a whole day back. And that was extraordinary. So in the periods that we were locked down, I was super productive in that regard. But then again, I'm a people person and I like being in front of clients. So that was the difficult. I like being in front of my people as well. I like them to see me as well. I'm very visible. I'm very active in the business, always have been. And so that was the difficulty. But, you have to then just work in ways that you can maintain that, right? You have to phone people, just spontaneously to catch up with your managers and your high performers. You have to flick to, Teams calls or, WhatsApp or whatever it might be, video calls, just to try and get that kind of that sense of connectivity. And that you just managed through. But very quickly it changed, didn't it, to being online. So and we embraced that.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring a message from one of our sponsors, Vincere, who they're quite similar to Hoxo, I believe. What I love about Vincere is I think we've got very similar visions on the way we do things. And, we do a lot of sharing about customer stories and its successes. And I think they've they've tried to really share why you should pick them as a business through their customers rather than just talking for the sake of talking. So what I've been checking out recently, if you go on their YouTube channel, type VINCERE on YouTube and have a look at what they've been doing, you'll notice that they've been sharing stories from their community on a weekly basis. And what's amazing about this is that the customers have been raving about things like ease of use, configurability, because look, we're not techies in recruitment, for fuck's sake. There's a reason we are in recruitment. It's because we're probably not the most technical minded in many senses. But Vincere's tool actually is, it's configurable for most people. And they've got all these features now from, video interviewing, all these different areas that they're trying to bring in so that you don't really need to invest in other tech platforms. You can have a one-stop shop solution that will give you everything. But don't just take Vincere's word for it. Watch their YouTube channel, find out what their customers think. I've found it really interesting and it's been awesome. So check out Vincere on YouTube and everything's on there. I'm genuinely, again, taking out the health agenda aside, I'm genuinely pleased that it's the impact it's had on the sector, because genuinely, like, flexible working was non-existent really in reality before the pandemic. It was.
But there were so many. There was so much narrative around presenteeism in terms of being in the office, and if you need to be in there, putting a shift in 8 till 8. It's the only way you're gonna. That's that. You and I know that's rubbish.
Yeah.
Right. It is rubbish. It's about productivity. It's about what you actually get done. When you're working. It doesn't matter where you're working. But the old school kind of management sort of philosophy, if you like, was they just wanted to see their team in the office, not scrolling through LinkedIn and bashing the phones. But as we know, that's not the answer. And so for those dyed-in-the-wool types, then that's probably a bigger mental shift. But I was open to it, and I'm a big supporter of it.
In a way, though, do you think coming back into the leadership role, with the change of leader with the guy, that almost was a great timing, because it gives you an opportunity, like, as it's all changing, you could literally go, right, like,
you can rewrite the rules.
Yeah, you can focus and almost you've come in fresh because you've not been dealing with those one-on-one conversations for the last.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Actually, so you can, in some ways, you can come in and not be dispassionate, because I'm always passionate about the business and I care about the individuals in it too. But you can rewrite the rules, and that was the exciting bit, really. That's what I meant when I said I quite enjoyed it. It was literally being able to rewrite the rules rather than going, this is how we've always worked and this is how all the industry works. It's kind of irrelevant, right? So that was the good thing. But the business performed really well during that period, which is great. As I was about to talk about, the kind of wellness and sort of well-being thing really kicked in for us. So I have got a PT that I still see. So, and in fact, it was, he tried to get me to go online. And for the first couple of months, I was like, this isn't going to work. I used to see him in the gym near the office, and it just wasn't working for me. But I eventually succumbed and went online, and it works, right? So, but just a lot of bands and kind of floor work and body weight and all that sort of stuff, because you don't have any of the stuff that you have in the gym. But I got him to do a couple of sessions a week for quite a long time online with staff. So it was kind of, we paid for him to do 2 sessions a week plus a yoga session on a Friday if you weren't into the gym. So that was going on for several months.
Great.
In kind of 20, and then we rolled it over to 21 as well. Loads of lunch and learn, loads of online stuff. We even had a virtual pub, so the Eames Arms on a Friday, where people could get together and kind of break off and have a drink with each other, to keep that connectivity. So it was lots of fun stuff, right? But lots of checking in.
It's mad to think now, isn't it? It's mad now that everything's back to pretty much normal, to think of not being able to just step in a pub or not to jump on a train.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing how quickly you get used to it, isn't it? When it comes back, and people starting to travel, and it feels like a long time
in the US. I've just found out, like, I put a post up. Thankfully, people replied, because I couldn't get any information online. But you've got to, because my partner's kids are unvaccinated. We've all got to do a 24-hour test before, like a lateral flow on video, and then 3 to 5 days in the US, the kids have got to do another one.
Yeah,
we're only actually there for 6 days, so it's like, well, I don't know if there's any point, but we'll do it and then bugger off anyway the next day. But that was quite surprising because I was like, we're still doing that. Like the US is still doing that. The UK, it feels like it genuinely has been parked now. It feels like we've.
Well, in the UK, I think it's different, isn't it? Really, I mean, we kind of abandoned the rules a while ago, didn't we? Which was good for us, but I think we were one of the first to do that. But there are other countries, and you're right. You're reminded of that when you get on a plane and start traveling and going, "Well, I've got to do a passenger locator form.
Yeah,
I've got to do a COVID test." Yeah,
it's not.
But still around, right?
I'll still take it over what we went through.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
So when the business started to come back to the office, then and you had that opportunity. I think if we quickly just the timeline was March to I think June. Then we had that eat out to help out time. September, October, people started coming back, and then we got locked down again from November to April. And that was that January to April was the market, but the market was booming at that point.
Yeah, it was.
So it was like, fuck me, there's money to be made. And then when April 12th hit, I remember I went to London, went out with my mates, sat in it was freezing out in this pub outside all day with like gloves on. But it was like, from there on, it seemed to kick in. How have you bounced the business back from an operation perspective? Because I think when you're always in or you're all out, it's quite straightforward.
Yeah.
The challenge is that people are different ages, different lifestyles, want different things. How have you guys managed the coming back together and having the freedom to make decisions and not be locked down?
So I think we kept the office open as much as we could legally, obviously, and the key thing was that there were lots of people that didn't have a working environment, where they could work properly. So they wanted to be in the office. And I think from a kind of wellness perspective, working and sleeping in the same room is not great, right, for anyone. So those in shared accommodation, those in flats, etc., that's just not the right sort of environment. So they were in the office and making use of the office. And I was going up to the office occasionally as well. But, the numbers were relatively small, I suppose. How have we managed coming back in? I mean, lots of talking to the business, lots of feedback. What do you want? How do you feel? What are your concerns? I mean, we absolutely went overboard on just making sure that everyone was comfortable coming back into London, traveling, because there was still that kind of air of it's not really safe and what if I get COVID and all that, that was still around. And so, we had the office deep cleaned every week, and it was cleaned twice a day and disinfect, all that kind of stuff. And we felt that if people came back in, there would naturally be a bit of a movement, and there was. As soon as you go back in and people start saying that they've been back in the office and saying how much they've missed it and how productive their day's been and how great it's been to get back into London, for example, there was just a bit of a growing movement. But then we had to obviously deal with, right, what, moving forward, are we going to be 5 days in the week? And we're not. So,
how do you manage it? And what is there any rules?
It's 3 days in the week. We try because we moved. You talked about Farringdon. We moved. In fact, conveniently, our lease came up, so it was 15 years we were in that office.
Remember, yeah.
So we signed a 10-year lease, then we signed a second 10-year lease, and we had a 5-year break. And that break clause we had to exercise in March of 21, and then move out in September of 21. So it was perfect timing. And we decided to serve notice on the lease and then start looking around the city at the kind of middle of last year, so sort of June of last year, whatever, that sort of time. And we basically looked at long leasehold properties, and we looked at agile working spaces, and we chose a WeWork purely because we've got our own floor. And we like the environment. We like the kind of WeWork kind of philosophy, I suppose. It gets you into their network. We're going to use it in the States as well. But it also gave us flexibility. So we signed a 2-year lease.
Is it smaller? Is it smaller than you had?
It is, and that's the point, right? So we had 7,500 square feet in Farringdon, 2 floors, and now we've got about 4,300 square feet in Moorgate. And so we have to get teams to come in at certain times during the week and rotate them around a little bit to make sure that we we get full use of that space. I mean,
Could you
everyone
can people break out into co-working if they need to? Like, so you have the
yeah. So the space that we've got has got big, it's got a boardroom, it's got 3 meeting rooms, it's got phone booths as well, which are brilliant actually for just a quick Zoom call if you want to get off the sales floor. But the space is great, and then within that building, there's co-working spaces and there's breakout spaces, but also with the WeWork network, it sounds as though I'm a sponsor. It's that you can go and use other office spaces if you need to. So if you've got a client that wants to meet in a different part of the city, you can just get on the app and book a room over there and get them to come in to that office. So actually, the pressure on the office, whilst it's there, it's abated slightly by spreading people around and that co-working kind of philosophy. But yeah, it's working so far. It's great. The business is in terms of location, it's a fabulous location. So 12 Moorgate, it's kind of close to Bank Station. Farringdon was brilliant when I first went there in 2006 because it was the fringe of the city. It was a bit edgy.
Yeah.
But I went there because the rent was cheaper. But fast forward 15 years, the rent's exactly the same price as the city.
The rise of Clerkenwell, and so it's incredible.
Really, really popular space, right?
What's cost comparable for WeWork in a smaller space?
Actually, the same, because what we were saving, in fact, so we had the same, effectively the same. We were paying the same rent as the city, but we didn't have significant rates because we didn't have a 24-man-hour sort of manned reception, if you like, and all of those kind of things. So actually it's pretty much the same. So we've gone from 7.5 down to 4,300, but the quality of this space has improved. So
and you've got all the amenities, and you've got
you've got all of that as well.
They've got cleaning involved, and I imagine everything.
All of that. All of that. Yeah.
We were in the workspace in Bethnal Green when we went from that really raw place which I came to. That was fucking rough, wasn't it? That was literally like I look back sometimes thinking that was hilarious. Like
you got to start somewhere though.
Yeah, the cafe outside was very ropey, but it was great. And then we moved to workspace in Bethnal Green at the Pillbox, which is cool, but we had to have our own cleaner, and the cafe was
exactly.
Yeah, you had to buy your own coffees and all that, and it wasn't it was cool, but it wasn't quite. And then now we have global WeWork licenses, so we've got a team in Joburg, Cape Town, London, and it is. I was in Cape Town last month, and it is literally the culture is the same. You walk in, it's the same kit, it's the same stuff. In Manchester, I had my own space. Now I'm in Sheffield. I've had to take a different company because unfortunately the Miami of the UK doesn't have WeWork. Can you believe it?
Well, so you know what it's like, right? There's definitely some benefits to it, and it'd be interesting to see, whether the agile working and the pandemic has played into their hands a little bit. But we like the space.
How do you find the kind of, because everyone talks about the challenge now is you bring someone more junior into the sector, and typically they would have been surrounded by top performers. They would have been listening a lot. Training was very physical. Now you've got people still want that junior community because that's the scalable model. But a lot of but I reckon a lot of your top guys will be mature. They'll have families. They'll be living out of the sticks. Are they going to want to come in as much? They're probably going to be less likely to be spending as much time in the office. So how are you finding that challenge?
Yeah, you're right. So I think with ACs or junior recruiters that need training, then you need to try and get them into the office as much as you can. But, you need to be cognizant of the fact that anyone asking anyone to be in the office 5 days a week is already on the back foot from the war for talent, right? So we don't. Our preference is they're in 4 days a week. And that's really to make use of the facilities there, right? Number one, as we've just talked about, so that they come into the city and they're in an office environment. But then we have to make sure that the manager is in as much as possible. But you're right, that often those managers are now taking advantage of 2 days from home. So they're not always in. Now, we leave it down to the manager to manage their own ACs the way they see fit, right? So we don't have a kind of a standard process around that, but we make sure that the ACs are effectively, they make use of the office space, so they're trained in the office. So we have an internal L&D function, and we make sure that if the manager isn't going to be in, then the ACs will come in and they'll do training sessions in the office, because I think the things that you can't replicate so easily are the kind of human contact, the things around, specifically training. I think it's better done in person. Of course, you can jump on a Zoom call, but I don't think it's the same. So all the things that I think are beneficial by being in person, we try and do in the office, and that's the kind of approach that we've taken to having.
What I found when I interviewed the guys from the 11 groups, you got Storm 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's growing. They're the fastest growing recruitment firm in the world at the minute. It's insane what they're doing,
isn't it?
But the way they are pretty aggressive with the office. I think they're giving people. I don't even know if they give the day from home. I don't know if they do. I need to remember. They'll figure that out. But the one thing they do is they set up operationally, like there's like pillars to the support that are always on the floor. So, for example, there's a high performance coach always on the floor. So even if your boss isn't in, there's someone answering questions, sitting at your desk, supporting you. They just literally are on the floor all day, every day. And I think thinking more like you got the manager and the coach and the first team coach, I think is quite a clever way to do it.
It is, and it's similar to what we do, but probably not as aggressively, if you like. But ultimately, there's always somebody in the office, whether it's a high performer or another manager. And we just encourage people to make sure that they both ways. That the ACs go and ask for help if they need it, and either there'll be an L&D person there or another manager that they can go and talk to if they need some advice or input, or they just pick up the phone to their current manager. But I think you're right. It's so we're trying to balance it off at the moment, but it seems to be working, and I think ultimately, I don't think we'll see a return to 5 days. Just across the industry and across our clients as well. I mean, that's the thing. We've had to deal with challenges around that, because I think what happens is trying to get in front of clients, physically in front of clients. The difficulty is that actually on the days that they're in the office, they're booked out in internal meetings because they want to do the face-to-face meetings because they're the important ones. Right. Yeah. So actually, it's really hard to get.
Is the Lloyd's market culture of beers, coffees, like buzzing around Leadenhall?
It's definitely it's definitely improved. I mean, even most of last year, I think it came back pretty aggressively, right? So less of the beers thing, I think more of the coffees thing. But the city, well, in fact, you probably haven't seen it, but the coming back into London, it's certainly
the last couple of times I've been, it's felt more normal. But
Tuesday
I'm thinking even the way the market worked, the Lloyd's building and the way the brokers walked in, and they would, I worked on the platform placement project, the PPL, when that was 5 years ago, trying to go to electronic trading, and they've been doing it for years. I mean, it's so backward in the way that they trade. Is all that still face to face?
Well, pretty much. I mean, ultimately, I think for the Lloyd's market, it was a bit of a shock. So, the CEO, John Neal at Lloyd's, had to try and get things online as quickly as they could. And a lot of it was probably done through Teams and Zoom, right? In terms of the throughput on PPL, I couldn't tell you. But they're still grappling with that. But as you know, it's an old market, isn't it? And it's, the sort of face-to-face culture is so deeply embedded, but there is a scramble to digitalize absolutely across the market. And I think people are taking one look at what Lloyd's are trying to ask them to do, but they're also doing their own things.
And that's good for you, isn't it? Because that means change, which is
absolutely. Technology investment, change across the business. So it's that market is busy, certainly busy. Lots of demand.
Amazing. Yeah. So a couple of things I want to talk about for the remainder of the episode. The first thing is around the market right now, and the signs of a potential. Everyone's talking about a recession. I put a post up last week, which wasn't intended to scare consumer confidence, but genuinely, I have 3,500 Academy members. I ask the question on every session: what's the market like? And my question is really, I then break it more specific. Is the job flow the same? Are you finding changes in the candidate confidence or community? And it's not alarming yet, but I'm definitely seeing more recruiters tell me that the job flow is slowing down slightly. It's becoming more back to normal as opposed to negative. But what have you seen?
Yeah, exactly the same. Really, it's slowed a little, but ultimately it depends who you ask about a recession, right? So as to whether there is going to be one or not, but ultimately also, what does that really mean for the recruitment industry, right? Because we're only talking about negative GDP growth for 2 quarters. So, but what impact does that actually have? I mean, recession is this scary word, I think we associate it with, markets changing rapidly and redundancies and everything else. But it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
And it could be a short recession. It could be a shallow recession. It could be a deep recession. I mean, that's the key. But ultimately, just on the job flow, the job flow is cooled a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. And we're in candidate short markets in most of our disciplines. That's the challenge. So what we're seeing from that is obviously, buybacks, counter offers that we didn't see at the start of last year because, that was a different market, plentiful jobs, lots of candidates. But, having then had 12 months of that, obviously, we're getting into a candidate short market, and it's about educating clients, as to how to best go about recruitment, because some of them are coming out with salaries that are just not right for where the wage inflation has gone to in their sector. So we'll see. We'll just have to see what happens, I suppose.
Have you seen? Do you think the wage inflation is that sustainable? Because there's also the element I was reading about again on LinkedIn about how what do you do when you start buying talent at an extortionate rate? What do you do with all your existing members of staff?
Well, that's right. Yeah, it becomes a challenge, doesn't it? I don't think that we've seen that necessarily permeate. Well, we have and we haven't seen it permeate into the recruitment market. But if you're talking about clients, obviously, it becomes a problem. Is it sustainable? Your question? No, of course it's not. Right? It's just nuts, particularly with everything else, inflation going up, cost of living going up, and it's going to put pressure on the cost base, isn't it, for every business? In recruitment, I think we're certainly seeing it, but we've always seen people trying to move around the industry, and their salary expectations are just completely out of kilter, either with the market or their own ability, right? So coming back to your point about organic growth, we've always been a big supporter of ACs because you can train people to do things in the way that you feel best suits the market and why we've been successful as a business, right? And it gives you that continuity in terms of bringing those people through the culture and giving them opportunities to lead or manage teams in the future. But the market's tough to hire at the moment. There aren't many people because lots of people are busy being successful, and when people are busy being successful, they don't entertain a conversation about moving. Why would they, right? So that market is tight as well, and also, when you come to hiring, as you'll know, when you come to hiring, I suppose, experienced people, it's a 50-50 chance really of those individuals bringing what they say they're going to bring to your business, and that's always the lottery, isn't it? So we do quite a bit of due diligence, quite a bit of testing, in terms of psychometrics and a structured interview process for experienced hires. The same for inexperienced hires, because ultimately you want to get it right more often than you get it wrong, right? So the more you can do around that, I think the better. But do you
think earlier on in your career you made some bigger errors in that space? I think as an early business
we've always made hiring errors. I think I put a post out recently about hiring with the head and the gut and all that kind of thing, and we've all gone on gut occasionally, haven't we? Because hope is the biggest killer in recruitment. It's somebody I work with tells me regularly, and the point is that you just hope, and I'm an optimist because and I always look for the best in people. So occasionally you want it to work out, but ultimately, if it's flawed in some way, it's just not going to work. So we've always done that, and we've always done that. We've I think everyone can say they've made hiring mistakes.
Yeah, and hopefully you make less of them as you get older and mature, but you'll still make them. I think the challenge is that people always know how to interview so well because they've been in the game.
Well, that's it.
Talk and
well, that's it. They've been over prepped, and they say all the things you want to hear. Working really hard, my billing figures are X, I'm always in the office, whatever it might be, and you've got to look through that and you've got to go for evidence-based interview techniques, right?
Yeah, for sure. Our second sponsor is always District 4. District 4 have worked with me or been a partner to this show for a long time, and they are designing a business that effectively wants to give recruiters their time back and also allow them to start a business. So do you want to have more time? Do you want to build more money? Do you want to spend more time with family? Do you want longer weekends? Well, all of D4's members have found that. They don't have meetings and commuting and all the unnecessary shite that a lot of recruitment businesses put their teams through, especially when they start and they think they have to keep all of the structure that they've had before. Sometimes for people like you, and I'm a bit like that, I like to wake up and just know I can control my destiny on a given day. And District 4 allows you to do that. So if you're somebody who wants to start a recruitment business or has already started and is struggling to scale in the way that you want to, not the traditional way, then get in touch via www.district4.io/Hoxo. Check out what they can do. So the pandemic's not only changed the business, but it's changed, obviously your role changed. So as a human being now, I want to think about you as a person and as a leader. What's the role like for you these days? Because as I said, you were open about your strengths, and actually that at the time you preferred having someone else at the helm of other things. What are you responsible for in 2022?
So I'm back in as founder and CEO of the businesses. So I've got all of them reporting to me, and ultimately, the way that we've made it work so successfully, I think, is making sure that I've got the right team around me and the right structure. So one of the changes that I made pretty much immediately back in February 20 was bringing somebody that'd been with the business in an HR capacity back into the business, created a new role as Chief People Officer, responsible for people and performance. So Ruth Foster came back in, and I appointed her to the board in that capacity. And what that's allowed me to have is the immediate team around me and my finance director that looks after finance and ops, and then Ruth looks after the people and performance piece. And I think between us, we've got the right combination of skill sets. So in the UK, we don't have a UK CEO, obviously, or an MD, and then all of the leaders will report into me. So there's a manageable number in the UK, and I've got Dan that runs Asia for me as well, and then the new report, obviously, David in New York.
How many people is that? How many people in total report to you?
So that's a great question. I try not to think about it, Sean, if I can, but there's about 7 or 8 that report directly into me in that capacity. And it's okay. And then I've obviously got others that I have contact with as well. And, I think the point was that we looked at the structure and said, how are we going to make this work? You got 2 choices. Do you go and replace, or do you do it? And if you're going to do it, how do you structure the business to make sure that you are giving them what they need and you're getting enough visibility across the business? And that was something that Ruth drove, definitely. And we agreed that it was manageable, in its current form. And it also gives me the visibility of the business as well, which is what I needed when I came back in, having focused on the other 2 businesses.
What are you not able to do now that you were doing when Guy was in?
Well, it's the bit that suffered probably is the external business development aspect. I still do it, but certainly I've got less time to do it than I had previously, because I had probably about 50% of my time was out in front of clients, and the rest was managing the other 2 businesses. So that bit suffered.
But it's for the right reasons.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for the right reasons. I think ultimately the focus has to be on the business and my reports. I've got to give them the time that they need and spend enough time with them to help them with their businesses, and in any way impart any kind of knowledge or coaching that I can around what needs to be done. But ultimately the business has a very capable senior leadership team, and I'm fortunate to have that. And it's a team that's been with me for a number of years. So ultimately they can take up that kind of external client-facing piece. All of our directors in the UK are sales directors, if you like, so they're out in the market anyway. So really, they're picking up the slack. And what I've done is just choose to keep in touch with those clients and those individuals that either want to continue that contact with me or are significantly important to the business that require that kind of input from me.
So what does an average week look like for you? How do you structure yourself?
I wish I'd say I was in charge of my own diary, but I'm probably not. I'm not in charge of my own diary. The average week is quite a lot of internal meetings. Essentially, we have a structure where we catch up with the directors formally once a month. So we'll go through a kind of dashboard session with those individuals. So that's an hour for each of the reports, just around that, maybe an hour to an hour and a half, and that's a complete trains up on their team, performance, individuals, activity, clients, net fee income, sales strategy, hiring is hugely important at the moment as well. So PRC pipeline, gaps in their team, etc. So that tends to take up quite a lot of time on a monthly basis. And then in between that, it'll be strategic projects. We're still working on quite a bit of stuff. So having kicked off a number of things at the back end of 2020 and into 21 around our sort of vision and values and purpose. There's obviously a focus on productivity, tech stack. The US is obviously a big focus for us as well. So, learning about that and getting the hiring pipeline in place so that business as well is really important. So it's kind of 90% of it is internal, either one-to-ones or group meetings about a particular topic, or kind of, tactical projects that we're doing at the moment. And then, board meetings on a monthly basis as well, going to the diary as well.
So is it a PA manages your diary day to day?
She does very effectively. Yeah, Jess.
How far in advance do you know what your day looks like? Is it night before, week before?
No. It doesn't change. It doesn't tend to change that immediately. So I can scroll ahead and see exactly what the week is looking like.
Yeah.
But Jess, who runs my diary very efficiently, and it is amazing that the value that brings to me is incredible. It's important just to be super organized and prepped and ready and whatever. But I'll know what the week looks like. And I'll try and come to London. I mean, a few weeks ago I was in London 4 days a week for about 3 weeks back to back, and actually this week I'm only in once.
Yeah.
It's because all my meetings are external in terms of online. This week we've got this obviously, but the other ones are internal. You can do those online. But I was in town largely because I was in front of people, either interviewing, meeting clients, etc. So
what do you think is the sweet spot? If you had to choose like the amount of time in the office and out, what's the sweet spot for you personally?
That's a good question. That is a good question. I think 3 days is a really comfortable amount actually, and not necessarily Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I mean, you drive to the station and on Monday, right, and the station car park's empty pretty much. But you go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's pretty full. Yeah. And then Friday's the same as Monday.
So is it an hour and a half train, or is it?
It is, yeah. So my journey in door to door is about an hour and a half. Yeah, an hour. I've got to drive, and then I've got just a short journey the other end. So 3 hours a day was what I was doing. So during the pandemic, obviously, I was getting almost a day back in its entirety, as we talked about earlier. But yeah, it's okay. It's manageable, completely manageable. And I chose to move out here to the countryside probably 6 years ago. And that was a good choice for us, and it's great. But I love being in London. I love the buzz of London. I love being in the office. I love seeing clients. So yeah, 3 days, but not necessarily Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday either. It's quite nice to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. And how has it impacted your life at home? Like, so you genuinely are around more. I imagine
chores.
More chores.
Try and get out of those as much as I can. No, look, on a serious note, I mean, it's been great to be around and do what everyone else has done, which is that work-life balance. I mean, I don't expect, I don't expect and I don't imagine that people are up at their desk at kind of 7:30 every day. If they want to go and walk the dog or go for a run, great. Absolutely great. As long as they're just being productive during the day, that's all that really counts. And I don't want to even see when they're clocking on or clocking off. It's irrelevant to me. It's totally irrelevant. What I care about more is that they're being productive and they're looking after themselves. That's the main thing. And that's kind of how I've managed to kind of get through this, and how I continue to kind of, carry on looking after myself. It's so important.
Do you think your life outside of work has been impacted by this change? Like, do you think there's, I don't know, whether relationships with family or whatever, is there a difference in you, do you believe, now than perhaps when you were every day going to London?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm around a lot more, so I'm certainly seeing a lot more of my wife and my kids. So the good thing is that I can take the kids to the bus in the morning, whereas before I might have been on the train. And she would have had to have done the school run and stuff like that. So sharing that, I think, is an obvious one. But also just seeing the kids in the morning, or being around to pick them up off the bus and ask how their day was. That sort of stuff is really meaningful. It's really meaningful. So did you ask how old they are?
How old are your kids?
So I've got an 18-year-old who's currently sat upstairs at the moment, trying to be really quiet for this podcast, and he's doing a good job. So he's just finished his A-levels, and he's taking some time out. So I'm trying to get him some work experience, basically, and show him the big bad world out there. So he's enjoying that. And then I've got one that's just doing GCSEs as well. So he's 16. So he's actually got his first GCSE today, biology exam. Yeah, he's got one tomorrow and one on Friday. And then my daughter, Honor, who's 12. So she's just singing and dancing her way through life at the moment, completely oblivious to what is a GCSE and exam. So yeah, 3 kids, which is enough. And it's been great to spend more time.
They must be loving it, though. They must be loving it, because they would have only ever known you to be up early, back late, like that, like weekends all around, I'm sure. But
yeah, you're right.
You must love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a lot to be said for that, and it just allows me to kind of snatch some time with either my eldest one, or certainly the weekends were normally sacrosanct a little bit for me, and there wasn't a huge amount of work that I could do on a weekend anyway, so I was always around at the weekend. And in fact, I always afforded myself a little bit of flexibility. I wasn't like previous guests you've had, kind of leaving at 5 a.m, coming back at 8 p.m. or whatever. When I was in London, when I started the business, I was up and I made the kids breakfast, and then I would leave, to walk to the office, which was only in Hammersmith at the time. So I saw them in the morning, and then my commute home was only 5 minutes anyway. So I would see them in the evening. So, I've never been that absent dad, that's always been working. So, and I've managed to maintain that balance, and it's been good. There's a lot to be said for that if you can manage that. But so yeah, they're seeing a bit more of me during the week, I suppose, which is a good thing. And I've really enjoyed the flexibility. I think there's certain things that you need to do when you're not being distracted, that you need to focus on, and working from home has been fantastic for that. And then there are certain things that we've talked about as well that are just so much better done in person in the office.
Yeah, agreed. What final few questions around, like, I just find it fascinating. Like, you're 20 years into you owning your own business. You worked for other firms before. You've been doing this a long time. You've got a great life, you've got a great family, you've got a great house. Why the hell are you working? Like you literally, the energy coming from you on this call, I know, I can see it. Like, you're buzzing, you love it, but why? Like, what are you? What's it all for now? Like, you could just literally go and play golf or something. Like, what is genuinely making you work?
I could. I never took up golf, actually, largely because it was just too much time out of the office. Yeah. I understand the business benefits of it, but no, I was never a big fan of that. I can get around a course, but not particularly well. Why am I still doing it? It becomes a bit of a legacy thing. You kind of start the business, and I started it without a business plan. And didn't really have a strategy about where we were going, just went at it really hard, knowing that this was the right way and I could create something. And then obviously very quickly you realize you do need a strategy. And in fact, it's good to have a vision and a purpose, because that's what people really need, to feel connected to. Why am I still doing it? Because there's just challenges all the time. And I said, which you kind of qualified my statement on the pandemic. I loved being up against it. That was a very kind of challenging, but really quite an exciting time around decision making. And at the moment, it's the market's good, but we've got a new challenge. We've just launched in the US, and I really want to make a success of that office before I can even think about taking more time out to do golf. That's a huge market. We are a good recruitment business, and we've got a good reputation. And for me personally, the challenge of making sure that the business performs and continues to perform now at its best ever levels, which is, I think, a testament to the team, certainly, but something I'm super proud of. We've got to keep that going, but also we've got to make a success of the US and the other business units. So I'm sort of driven by that. It's not an ego thing, really, because I'm quite, I'm not egocentric. I don't solicit kind of media attention. As I've only been on here twice. I've been but, I'm not big on that stuff. It's not important to me, really. But it's about the business, and I think there's just more to do. There's more to do and more to be achieved, and that's what's driving me at the moment. Plus, I'm just can you imagine the disaster that would happen if I just put my boots up? I mean, my wife would be having none of it. As much as she quite enjoys me being at home, I've got just too much energy, really, and I need to expel that in the right way, which is on the business. I can't wait to get on a plane to get out to Asia. It's been a long time since I've been out there, and I can't wait to get on a plane to get out to the US and kind of absorb that market. But no, I've got too much energy and I think too much to give for now, just to step back, and obviously I've stepped back once, and that didn't work necessarily for me. So and for the business. So I'm just really enjoying the role at the moment, and I'm enjoying the market.
I like it. I think it's brilliant to see, like you say, 20 years in the game, you still got the energy. It's funny because I've interviewed so many people, and everyone's got their own agenda. Everyone's doing it for their own reasons. A lot of people want to exit and make millions and swan off into the sunset, and that's fine. But the majority of people that I've interviewed that have actually done that, I'd say majority have said it was underwhelming. Yeah, they do it again because the guy Mark Zanowski, who sold the Staff Group, was like within a year he started his next venture because he was like,
never say never. But that's I can see that happening.
Yeah.
So it needs to be carefully orchestrated, and ultimately, it doesn't have to be a full exit, does it? It could be a role again. You could remain in. If you do a good job on the earn out, they might want you to stay around. That's there's loads of different ways of constructing an exit, right? But yeah, I've got loads of energy. The business is in great shape. We've got so much to do. We've got a full agenda. In terms of what we want to try and achieve this year and next year, because we've got, as part of our kind of future at Eames 3-year plan, we're in the second year of that. So we've got this year and next year, and it's all really good.
Where does that get you to the point? That'll be a final question: is where does that get you? So the 3-year plan, where you're going to be in an ideal world at the end of that?
Where are we going to be? So physical locations probably similar. We are considering one more, which would be over in on the continent. So probably Germany would be the obvious place, but it's not entirely necessary. Headcount wise, we've got and we put it out there a while ago. Actually, we've got to hire 100 people as part of that 3-year plan, which is quite a significant number. And we're there or thereabouts at the moment in terms of on track, but that's a big number to go for.
Yeah.
And then financials, well, probably indiscreet of me to talk about, but bigger than we are at the moment. The business has performed, incredibly well, and we're ahead of last year. In fact, we're about 45% ahead of Q1 last year, this year, which is great. And the run rate is strong. But it's a marathon, not a sprint. We'll see what the rest of the year brings. We touched on a recession. There could be one, right? So ultimately, we've just got to bank as many months ahead of budget as we can, and we've got to make sure that the business is readied and prepared for kind of every eventuality. You don't want to get complacent. You don't want your people becoming farmers where they don't understand how to BD. You've got to maintain your kind of client strategy in terms of acquisition strategy and candidate strategy. So you just got to be ready, right? You just got to be ready for those eventualities. But yeah, it's about growth with a few kind of strategic goals woven into it, basically.
Well, I'm delighted to find out that things are going so well. It's been a great, I love having guests back on. I think it's something I will do more of, is get some of the earlier guests on, because it's just great to see the development and the changes and check back in. And I like I say, let's get a part 3 in the diary in a year or two. Let's find out how things go.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on. I really appreciate being invited back. So it's good to see you, and it's good to hear your business is going well as well.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, we're going all right, mate. We're in a good shape. I think the pandemic for us as well has genuinely fast forwarded kind of the appetite for what we do, and actually people understanding how important their online brand is. So previously people were, it's funny because in the last year, the sector has experienced such amazing results that in some instances, people have been like, we just don't need it yet. Like, we're printing money. Why the hell do we need to change? But I think what the pandemic taught us is we can never rely on, we can't rely on anything. You've got to keep building.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing about me. I'm not even, there'll be people on LinkedIn who do better than me, but I show up every day. Like you don't miss me on a day. Like, I'm always fucking there, and I will always be there. And that is my strategy, right? Consistency will win. And that's what I teach people. That's what my methodology is. And I think that's what you've proven over 20 years. You show up every day, whether you're at home or not.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot to be said for that and the success of the business and the philosophy across the business. But on your point about marketing, and we invested really heavily in 20. So at the back end of 20, when the world was still in the midst of the pandemic, we kicked off a large scale brand refresh, as Sarah will tell me, and went down this went down, we're going to go vision, values and purpose. We've got to get this nailed so that people understand why we show up every day, and give them that purpose of, why they're working from their current kitchen table or whatever it is, but that connectivity to the business, knowing full well that things will change and things will come back. But I felt it was slightly lacking and it needed to be redefined, and it was a great opportunity to do that. So we kicked off a pretty extensive and expensive program of work around that, and I'm delighted that we did. I think the timing was great. But to your point, I think that, and it's probably a question for another podcast around the connectivity around recruiters' roles and how much of it is actually marketing related is so significant, and it's become so much more significant over the last, and you'll tell me longer, but 5-6 years, people, and those that get it are really doing well from that, and those that don't, won't.
It's literally that. The hardest thing about it is the people, and this will be the final point because we've got things on, but the people that would make more from LinkedIn are the experienced people, right? Those with gravitas, those with relationships, those with networks, those with experience. They would absolutely fly. Like there's a guy, Kyle Winterbottom, who's coming back on the show. I trained him. Kyle used to work. He owns an agency called Audition. He's now in the top 100 most influential data people in the world, in the UK. He's been invited on podcasts, books. He's quoted in books. His brand is insane. He gets 100% of his revenue in 18 months has come to him. And because he's got the stories, right? But the majority of the senior end of the market don't want to change. It's a bit like insurance, they've always worked a certain way. And then you have all these juniors coming in who are really open to it. But the challenge they have is they look up and no one in their agency is doing it at a senior level. So it's like, that's the challenge I'm trying to change right now. My mission is to propel the best people in the sector, stand them out amongst the people that don't want to be seen, because I guarantee like I say, media content will not replace the recruiter, but the recruiter who uses media will replace the one that won't. That's it. That's a fact. That will happen. So
amen to that.
I want to power that. I want to be behind that. That's my mission.
I think you are, Sean.
I'm trying. Look, Matt, absolute pleasure. If anyone's listened, as always, wants to work for Eames or even just wants to pick your brains, is LinkedIn a good spot to drop you a note?
Absolutely, LinkedIn, I'm on there, obviously, and I'd welcome it. Actually, off the back of the last episode that we did, I had a few people contact me just to kind of pick my brains on their business, and a couple of people had a small startups. They just wanted to know how we'd scaled and some of the pitfalls, etc. So I was delighted about that, and I'm more than happy to field any kind of calls or questions. So
amazing, legend. Well, look, thank you so much. Let's get you back on in a couple of years, and good luck with everything you've got.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, you too.
Thank you, as always, for listening to today's show. I truly, truly hope that you got value from it. That's the only reason I take time every week, is to ensure that my audience, future and existing recruitment owners, are learning from each other to make this industry that I love so much stronger. Today's episode was brought to you by Hoxo Media. I am the CEO and founder of Hoxo Media, and we are the world's leading content marketing and personal branding agency for recruitment businesses specifically. So we are working with over 200 agencies and 2,000 recruiters right now, both managing the brands, producing content, building written, video, podcast content for niche recruitment agencies all over the world, as well as coaching at a desk level individual recruiters in your businesses how to be better on LinkedIn. That's how to brand themselves. That's how to produce content. That's how to use the opportunity on LinkedIn to get traffic to their profiles and turn that into business. We're coaching people all over the world every single day. If any of that sounds of interest, please do visit www.hoxomedia.com or drop me, Sean Anderson, a personal message on LinkedIn. I would love to talk to you. Tune in again next week on LinkedIn. I'll see you soon.